All right, guys, we're going to start off here with number 1. So this one is asking about probability that a student's first class is humanities given that the student is male. Now, when it says that given that the student is a male, that means you kind of assume the truth of that statement. So we're only going to be looking at the males here. So if I just add up all the male students, that is only 180. And so then on the numerator here, I need to then say out of that 180, how many of those are in the humanities class. So that's going to be 70 right there. So you can reduce this fraction. I see the answers, though, are decimals, so I would just divide that out. And so I get 0.38 repeating, so it looks like they rounded up to 0.389. All right, same idea here on number 2. So when we say given that he or she is a junior, that means that we're only looking at this column right here. We're assuming the truth of that statement. And then from that, so that's our denominator. So that's our denominator right there is the total of that, which looks like it is 28. And then in the numerator, it's just the afternoon classes. So out of that 28, only 13 liked the afternoon classes. So if I divide that out, that gives me about 0.464. So that's going to be. And next up here, we have 8 balls numbered 1 through 8, placed in an urn. 1 ball is selected randomly. What's probably the number is not 2. So I would just say, if you kind of thought about this logically, there's 8 balls in there, and then only one of them is not a 2, which means, or sorry, only one of them is 2, which means 7 of them are not a 2, so that's going to be A. All right, next up here, it says we got 2 urns, and then urn 1 has 4 green and 6 black, while urn 2 has 5 green and 3 black. And what's the probability if we pull 1 out of each? They are both black, so these are kind of 2 separate probabilities here. So I'll do 1 for the first urn. And so the probability on that one is we have 6 out of 10. And then urn 2, our probability on that one for black would be 3 out of 8 total. Now, this one says they are both black, and so that to me kind of implies that it's an and. It doesn't say the word and, but once again, it implies it, so we need both of them. And so and is always a multiplication there. So I'm going to go ahead and reduce these before I multiply them. So I'll do this as 3 over 5 times, that one doesn't reduce there, so it's going to be 9 out of 40. All right, next up here, a coin is tossed and a die is rolled. So what's the probability the coin shows tails, and which tells me to multiply, the die shows 2. So I have 2 fractions here. The tails is 1 out of 2, and then on a die, it's 1 out of 6. So we'll just multiply those 2 together. All right, next up here, we have a summation. I see that this is arithmetic because it's in the form mx plus b. So I can use my sum formula, the n over 2 times the first number plus the last number. So in this case, we're doing 22 numbers, so it's going to be 22 over 2. And then for the a sub 1 and the a sub n, we're going to plug in the top number and the bottom number. You're going to plug them in and see what you get, and that's going to be those 2 right there. So I'll let you guys do that. All right, next up here, it says a number cube has the numbers 1 through 6 on them. The probability of rolling a number less than 7, that is going to be 1, or 100%, or 6 out of 6. All those numbers are less than 7. All right, next up here, find the sum of the infinite geometric series. So first, I'm going to need to find r. R is any term divided by the term in front of it. So I'll use a2 divided by a1, so that's going to be 1/3. That is in between -1 and 1. If it were not, then it would have no sum. But if it is, then we can use this formula. The sum equals a1 over 1 minus r. So a1 is 1, 1 minus r would be 1 minus 1/3. We need to get a common denominator down here to do that subtraction. So it's going to be 3 over 3 minus 1 over 3 will be 2 over 3. I'm going to turn this top into 1 over 1 so that when I multiply by the reciprocal, it's times 3 over 2, which will obviously be 3 over 2 because it's multiplying by 1 over 1. All right, next up here, probability of a 3 or a 2. So there's 6 possibilities when we roll a fair die, and then these are 2 possible desired outcomes. So that would be 2 over 6 or 1 over 3. Next up here, it says, let's see, the bag contains red balls. So these are all red, and then these ones are going to be white. I'll do that in yellow. So then part A here, what's the probability that is red or odd numbered? So for this one, I do see that word or, which always means addition. And so for the red, it would be 7 out of 10. And then for odds, it's going to be 5 out of 10. Since we have 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. So this is the probability of red, this is the probability of odd. However, there is some overlap in this case, so anytime there's overlap, we need to subtract that out. So the overlap in this case would be the ones that are red and odd. And so if I look through those, I have 1, 2, 3 of those, so minus 3 over 10. And so you can see that that gives us 9 out of 10. Another way that some people do this is they just take the 7 out of 10 for the red, and then they only add the one odd that wasn't in that, and actually 2 odds, excuse me, that were not in that, so not the 3 and the 9 over there, so it's going to be 2 out of 10, and that gives us that same answer. So that's an alternate way to do it. All right, so then same idea for part B here. For part B, I'm first going to do the probability that it's blue, which is 3 out of 9, and then plus the probability that it is even, which is 5 out of 10. But then I again have to subtract out that overlap. So the ones that are both, not blue, this was actually should have been white. So the ones that are both white and even, which is just that 8, so that's minus 1 out of 10. And so that gives me 8 minus 1 is 7 out of 10. All right, number 11 is very similar to number 10, so I'm going to let you guys try that one on your own. All right, next up here, we got a drawer with some socks in it. We need the probability the first sock is blue, and so that means we're going to be multiplying. The second sock is white. So the first sock is blue. So that is going to be 8 out of the total, which would be, let's see, 16 plus 8 is 24. And then the next one here, it does say that we return the sock. So that means that we still have 24 socks in there. If we did not return it, that would drop down to 23. And then the number of white socks is 6. So we'll just reduce that and then multiply them together. All right, next up here, we have an infinite geometric series. I'm going to first find r, and it's 4 over 1, so that's 4. And since that's not between -1 and 1, then that means that is no sum. All right, next up we got number 14, which is saying it's an and problem, so that just means multiply. So I'll let you guys do that one on your own. All right, next up here, we are going to draw 2 marbles. And we want both of them to be green, so that is really kind of an implied and here. I want both of them to be green, so that is going to be multiplying. So the probability of green is 21 out of 51. And then it does say here that once we pull the first one, it's returned to the jar and mixed in. So that means the probability is not going to change on the second time. We're not altering the original one, so it's just going to be that. So I'll let you guys multiply that one out. All right, next up here, we're trying to pull 3 yellow marbles. Now, once again, they don't use the word and, but I'm going to say this is implied and because we want 3. But this one's not returned, so on this one, we're going to start off here. Our yellow is 8 out of, let's see, that's going to be 24. And then if we get yellow every time, the top and the bottom are going to decrease because we're assuming we're getting those yellows, which is decreasing the amount of yellows and the total. So that would be my setup there. And I'll let you guys multiply that out. All right, next up here, we've got a table. So it says here, what is the probability that a randomly selected ore was made from spruce purchased in 2010? Now, even though this says the word and here, I'm not going to multiply because it's not saying we need to have 2 ores here. It's just kind of 2 stipulations. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say out of the total, which I should probably add up the total here is 18. How many of those fit both of those criteria? So wood and purchased in, spruce and purchased in 2010. So that's just a 3 out of 18. For part B here, it says what is probability that an ore is made of spruce given that it was from 2010. So when it's given, then we assume the truth of what's after the given. So we're only looking at the ones that were made in 2010, so that's out of 7. And then the spruce in that category is only 3. For part C, same idea here, except kind of the other way around. So we're going to say given that it's spruce wood, which means only spruce wood is 9. And then of those 9, how many were in 2011? That's 6. Part D, It says, what is probably an ore is made out of ash wood? So that's kind of out of the whole population. So that's going to be out of 18. So the ash is the 9. And then for part E, this is another given. It was built in 2011. So 2011 is 11. And of those, 0 are cedar wood. So that's going to be 0 out of 11.